Welcome to In Such a Time, conversations on Jewish life, leadership, and meaning. Each week, Rabbis Jonathan Jaffe and Liora Landi explore the moments, questions, and ideas that shape who we are and who we aspire to be. And now for this week's conversation.
Welcome back to In Such a Time, conversations on Jewish life, leadership, and meaning. I'm your co-host, Rabbi Jaffe, alongside Rabbi Landi. And today we're recording this session just as the news has come in last night of the acceptance of the deal in order to bring an end to the war in Gaza and the hostages home, God willing. And so it's a very momentous moment for all of us, for the Jewish people and for the world. And Rabbi Landi and I thought we would spend some time thinking about not only what this moment means, but perhaps looking back now at 2 years of a transformative period for Israel and for the Jewish people, and what are some of our hopes and feelings for what this might mean for us going forward. So I think you elected to go first, Rabbi Landi. So where are you in this moment, and where do you hope to go?
It's such a momentous day. I mean, I think I'm kind of speechless still at the idea that this war could be over and that people are going to be reunited with their loved ones, and that hostages are going to make their way home and that families are going to be able to bury their dead. Like it's so heavy. And I can't stop thinking about the fact that not just that it's been 2 years, but that this is part of the history of the Jewish people. There's so much liturgy about the return of captives from enemy territory coming back to the borders. V'shavu banim legvulam, like the boys came back from their enemy lines to the borders of Israel. And I just feel like this is part of a historic moment of like being right here in the now. And it's also just makes me feel that we're part of this push and pull of Jewish history, of being in the land and having a relationship with the land and being kicked out of the land. And what does that mean spiritually? And what does that mean in terms of our relationship with one another? Often that's happened historically for the Jewish people when we've been at odds with one another, when we've had fracture and had doubt. And that was certainly the case 2 years ago, that the people of Israel, the Jews, Israelis, were fractured. Um, and I'm just thinking about so much life that has been lived in 2 years and so much loss that has happened in those 2 years as well. And this momentous occasion of hopefully the end of the war also is so bittersweet for families that are not going to have their children come home, who've died, who they don't know what's happened to their children. Some of them, like they don't know how their loved ones died, and so it's just so incredibly bittersweet. And I'm just feeling. I mean, this is definitely a feelings episode for me, because I live and breathe Israel and I live and breathe the Jewish calendar. And this war started Simchat Torah, and it's hopefully going to end on Sukkot. And I just feel like the bookends of that kind of are haunting me. Where I have a lot more to say, but where are you on this?
I can go all day talking about these things. Surprisingly, because I tend to be, I'd say, an optimist. I'm incredibly thankful that the hostages are coming home, and the images just of last night of Israelis at 4 a.m. going out into the streets and crying, and the hostage families. It's overwhelming. And yet the part that's surprising is I find myself with resentment and with anger, um, along with the blessing. I resent the fact that it took us 2 years to get here. I resent the fact that if the entire world on October the 8th, 2 years ago, had said, no, you can't invade another country, abduct 250 of its people, kill 1,200 of those people, and then use those 250 people as bargaining chips. If the Red Cross had said, no, we won't go along with this, if the UN had said, no, we won't condone this, if the Vatican had said, no, you can't do this, if all of these organizations stood up and said, this will not stand, then literally tens of thousands of lives could have been saved. And the fact that we even treated this as something we're willing to take on in a way that I don't think would happen if this had happened to other countries and other
Yeah.
states is deeply hurtful to me. I'm frustrated that the deal that was taken at the end is almost identical to the deal that was put on the table back in May. We could have saved, again, thousands of lives in all of this time. I'm frustrated that the people who were in the streets just 2 days ago to flood New York City for Gaza, the people who have been out for 2 years saying ceasefire now, there's a genocide, ceasefire now, that now that there's a ceasefire, they've gone silent. And it leads you to wonder what they actually meant when they said ceasefire now, ceasefire for Israel's enemies, ceasefire for just for Israel. So I have this frustration deep inside of me that it had to come to this, that the shedding of Jewish blood is treated more cheaply than others. For me, that it brings that home again and again. And then my other frustration with this, and I think this is something that you know firsthand, being in Israel for so long, is that the Israeli public was so divided, and that especially the Israeli government had their eye off the ball to such a degree to allow Hamas to gain such a power, that to allow for a tumor to grow on, just on Israel's border unchecked, that when female soldiers reported that they saw training exercises by Hamas, that those were discounted by a lot of their male superiors, that the kibbutzim in the area were left unprotected. There's so much that could have been done in both of these cases to prevent such horrors and loss of life, that I find myself taken aback by what has had to happen in order for us to finally come to the end of the war. I'm so glad, so grateful that the hostages are coming home and hopefully the violence will stop. I don't know what to say. It's such a negative feeling on me that it's had to come to this in order for us to reach this day.
Yeah, I don't think anybody could have foreseen such a horrific war. On October 7th, I thought that was the worst possible day and nothing could be worse. And it's gotten worse. Like, it's gotten so much worse. And Palestinian lives have been lost of innocence and people are suffering there. And we have a divide in our country, and Israelis have lost so many people, and not just the actual loss, but like people have lost their youth, and people have gone to war and come back as other individuals. Like, the fabric of Israel, I mean, every generation has had a bad war, but this war surpasses, I think, almost all the kinds of wars that have been had in Israel. Like, this is the longer war and a more gruesome war, and these people are coming back to change. And so the day after in Israel, it's going to be like Tkuma, like it's going to be an opportunity to rise, but people are literally they've lost their limbs and emotionally have lost some other limbs. And I just don't know what the day after looks like. And I'm so nervous and I'm so worried and I'm so thankful, as you said, to reach this moment. But I'm just processing live here with you. Just so many mixed feelings and frustrations, and also complete resentment at the Israeli government in many ways. And I know that you and I have agree and disagree on this as well. What choice do they have in certain situations, and in other situations they could have carried out a more moral version of what war looks like. And you know, sometimes I feel like I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I like start exhaling and taking these like just letting out gusts of wind that I'm like, oh my God, I was holding my breath. And it just, this is a moment that just feels like you have to hold your breath a little bit longer. Because if you don't hold your breath, then something terrible could happen. And I'm so worried about what next week is going to look like. Um, so it's hard, like being Jewish in this moment is, for a while now, has been holding a lot of contradictions together, but even more so in this moment. Just loss in life, in love, in resentment, and fear, and existentialism, and all of it combined, and hope, so much hope.
I I agree. And when it comes to the war, I feel as though I am I have not lost faith in the morality of the IDF soldiers themselves. And I think that again, I take a step back and real humility, think if that was me in the situations, and we've talked to friends and family who serve in the IDF and the vulnerable positions in which they are placed, and deeply understanding of the way that they operate. I think the fact that this deal is being voted on by the Knesset, I think just about at this time, and is overwhelmingly likely to pass, it also helps to redeem for me a bit, not all of the Israeli government, because what it means by accepting this plan is that it was never Israel's intention through this war to annex Gaza. It was never Israel's intention to kick out the Gazans forcibly or to annex the West Bank. They have agreed to avoid all of those things. And I think that's what keeps Israel on the ethical threshold, that Israel defending itself against um, external threats and doing everything they can to bring back their hostages, I think is a absolutely moral cause for war. I think that when you had members, the far right members of the government, who were saying terrible things out loud about wanting to annex Gaza, wanting to resettle Gaza, wanting to annex the West Bank, um, that it provided fodder for those who thought the worst of Jews. And I will see if the current coalition government stands after this is accepted. I'm hoping it doesn't, and that perhaps that others, the Gadi Eisencoats of the world, the center rights of Israel, will join the this Knesset, and we will not have to worry about not just people from the far right, but incompetent people like Ben Gvir and Smotrich, who should never be in the positions in which they are, and say things that truly provide all of the ammunition for anti-Semites to aim that I'm hoping they won't be heard from again. And it's hard to put that genie back in the bottle. But let me speak about one other sort of genie in the bottle moment. Remember that we were at a conference and Bret Stephens was speaking, and he was talking about October the 7th and its aftermath and the response, both in the US and around the world, as like an MRI,
Yeah.
and seeing that the cancer had spread everywhere,
Yeah.
but we just hadn't seen it. Seeing the way in which Jews are talked about and treated throughout the world,
An MRI of Jew hatred.
I think was a really a wake-up moment for me personally and for a lot of the Jewish world, that perhaps some of the assumptions we held about the way that we were accepted in the world and viewed were a bit naive. I wonder now, if Israel agrees to a ceasefire, will the European soccer clubs, will they agree to again have matches with Israel? Will Israel allowed to compete in Eurovision, as some have boycotted, threatened that they won't? Will Jews who are visibly Jewish feel safe walking down the streets of Europe or the streets of Manhattan? Will synagogues like ours need to hire Pentagon-like security teams to protect preschool students because we're afraid that someone's going to come in and shoot a 3-year-old because they're Jewish? I think that it has been an eye-opening experience to what the world really thinks of Jews. And I don't see us returning right away to a kumbaya moment of feeling as though kol beseder, that everything's okay.
I wonder sometimes what if it hadn't been this, what would have been the thing to shake up the world? Because the world was shaken, like there was some kind of earthquake leading up to this, and this just felt like a culmination of so many things happening in the world, like so much angst and chaos, and just a shift in the way that the world order works. And this kind of just put all the focus on Israel, Gaza, Jews, what it means to be safe in this world. And so I just wonder, like, they hadn't been this, what would it have been? Like the Jewish tradition says that the end of the world will come at Megiddo. I
Mhm.
mean, we're so focused on Israel being the center of the world, but everyone else is too. And so it's kind of just like reinforce the things that I already thought to be true in some ways. And I'm also very fearful of letting myself, and now we're going to switch spots. I'm still hopeful that there's more love of humanity in the world than there is anti-Semitism. And I think that the sickness of hatred and the sickness of anti-Semitism and the sickness of xenophobia has been released, but I don't think that that's the majority of humanity. I do think that probably the majority of humanity is quiet and maybe apathetic or passive, but I don't think that most people are hateful. I perhaps say this to myself to not want to confront the fact that we live in an anti-Semitic world. I just don't think I can allow myself. I've actually never believed that pervasive anti-Semitism was real, even though it was around me. Like I gaslight myself into thinking that that can't be, because how could a world exist where my children could be targeted for being Jewish? Like I just can't comprehend that, knowing that what I've gaslit myself to feel is not necessarily true. But one of the things about anti-Semitism and the rise of anti-Semitism, and this has been true throughout history, is that when we feel threatened, we go to our Judaism, we seek more Judaism, we seek our faith, we seek to be close. That's been something that we felt immediately after October 7th, is that people, it felt alive. People wanted to be Jewish again. People wanted to embrace their tradition and feel more religious and feel more connected to something deep and ancient and rooted. And that is the privilege of this moment, that people want to be Jewish in a very serious, beautiful way. That's always been the trend. When we're threatened, people discover their Judaism. When we're less threatened, people assimilate, lose their Judaism. And it's like an in and out kind of dance that's happened throughout the centuries. And we're certainly in a moment where people feel an acute threat. And so they're looking towards their Judaism. And I want to help people hold on to that even the day after, when they're not feeling threatened and they're not feeling scared. And how do we take the Judaism that people seek because they feel scared and make that positive and sustainable and something that can be perpetuated? And so I'm there right now. Like what does the day after look like for Israel? What does the day after look like for Jews? What does the day after look like for Jews in the diaspora? What does the day after look like for us here at Bethel?
Yeah. I go back to where you started about, what if this hadn't happened? And I guess I feel like, and again, I am sounding like such a downer today. I feel like this was always going to happen at some point.
Yeah,
And let me explain where
know
I'm
what
coming
you
from
mean.
with that Jew hatred has gone through, and I spoke about this at our Yom Kippur discussion, has gone through, I think, three major periods. First one being Christian anti-Semitism. And Jews from that time were seen as that which stood in the way of salvation, the world reaching completion. If only the Jews would accept Christ, then everything would be okay. And the Jews at that time, from then, were attributed um, malicious supernatural abilities, as the killers of God. And Jews could. There's nothing you could say about Jews that wouldn't be believed, that would be beyond the pale. And that lasted for a good 1,500 years or so. And then you came to the the anti-Semitism of the secular world, and that is the Jew as whether it's the capitalist, the socialist, the social contaminant, whatever you'd want to call of Europe, of these different forms, that the Jew is the symbol for all that ails society and that which is pulling it apart. And that seemed to, by the 20th century, be on the wane as well. And what really arose in the 20th century was the third era, which is the problem with Jews was their nation. And that I would say, give us proof to this, that everything that we would say that were said about Jews is said about Israel. Baby killers, supernatural abilities, I think the Egyptians accused the Jews of having dolphins with that they had trained by the Mossad to attack swimmers outside of it.
Lasers.
Jewish space lasers. But you take everything that is most abhorrent to the modern world, colonialism, racism, apartheid, right, again and again, genocide, and Israel becomes the way to direct this towards the Jew, and that again the MRI was out, and that if it wasn't on October 7th of 2023, it was going to happen at some point in which this for almost a century we have allowed this hatred of the Jews having a nation to exist and to fester. And whether it began with within the Russians, the Soviets, and the idea of Zionism as racism, or later on university campuses as Zionism as ethno-state, apartheid, colonialism, that we just let this happen everywhere. And the hatred of Judaism was latent underneath the surface all along. And so maybe I am thankful that it's at least we're a little bit less naive and know that it's there. But it makes me really worried about going forward. And I want to I'll go more positive to where you are as well. I think that I think the past 2 years has been a waking up moment for a lot of Jews to say that maybe the world doesn't love us as much as we thought they did. But maybe we love each other even more than that. And I agree with you that we wax and wane when it comes to what degree we want to be universalist or when we want to be more particularistic. And our generation was already in the movement towards greater particularism. But I think that people lost a sense of what it means to be Jewish in terms of being part of a family, being part of a people. And when you see Israelis in the streets at 4 a.m. going out to cry because the hostages are coming home, that's not a religious response, right?
No.
That's someone saying, these people, they are my family. Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh B'zeh. I am responsible for them as they are responsible for me. I think that's something that is a bit of a wake-up call to many American Jews who didn't realize that they had a family and that it was waiting for them all along. Sorry, that was a lot.
No, I'm not. I'm not. You're not exasperating. The world is. It just feels. Well, I have a question, a follow up instead of what I feel. When's the first time that you felt that Jews were hated? Like, when did you know that?
It's interesting because I grew up in like the most idyllic non-Jewish environment in which I was, all of my friends were non-Jews growing up in Hawaii and accepted wholeheartedly that way. In Hawaii, much more of the feeling is being against Caucasians, what's called Haole in Hawaii, and sort of putting together all that way. So I didn't really, I guess the first time ever was at Camp Ramah. We had an overnight, and I remember that there was a bunch of kids and they heard that we were Jewish and started throwing rocks at us.
That's awful.
But really it wasn't, I really came into experiencing anti-Semitism through anti-Zionism. That has always been, like, for me, the focal point. And maybe that's because I don't outwardly present Jewishly on the street. I often wear a baseball cap over my kippah, not to be bothered. I don't have tzitzit out. So those are the main ways in which I did. Then I guess the other one I would say for me is, and I know we may have a machloket this way as well, to watch how the media has treated Israel's wars versus other countries' wars. And not just the incredible microscopic focus on Israel and everything it does, but the way in which Israel is treated for when it exerts power to defend itself versus any other country when it does. The fact that when the Taliban released numbers of killed, that the media would always hedge against it and say we can't trust what the Taliban has to say. They're a terrorist organization. And yet Hamas's word is taken as truth. the way in which social media has fueled a hatred of Jews and Israel this way, that is just my, because Israel is always treated differently. That really was for me an entree into understanding the double standards applied to Jews.
My starting point, I think, has more anti-Semitism in it than you.
I'd love to hear.
I grew up in Orlando, and I will never forget driving home. It's a very Jewish American experience, driving home from synagogue on Shabbat, past the JCC, and there was a KKK gathering there at the JCC to intimidate the Jews. I remember we drove home, my dad went back to the JCC. I was really scared because in Orlando, I was affected by the civil rights movement, and I understood that it could get ugly, and I didn't know what that meant, and that was like the first time that I knew about the Holocaust growing up, and that was definitely a part of that was a starting point for me, because Holocaust education was really ingrained in me from my Jewish education at day school. That was like the first time I really felt Jew hatred.
Yeah.
And then I grew up and I experienced it a little bit in public school in New York, but it's not a good look in New York to be anti-Semitic. People didn't find that cute when I reported swastikas to the principal. They didn't find the swastikas cute. They took my side and apologized profusely. You don't want to, in New York, people don't want to be caught being overtly anti-Semitic in that way. And then I went to Israel. And in Israel, it was very much, I didn't experience anti-Semitism for about almost 20 years. But I also didn't fully understand the way that it was covered in Israel either, because I was there, and Israel media is equally Israel-centric. Just the way that the media covers Israel around the world, that's also the way that Israel covers Israel around in Israel. And so I didn't really understand the rise of anti-Semitism. I didn't feel it in my heart. And then October 7th, it was still hard for me to understand. It was still hard for me to comprehend it, that this is, I kept trying to explain to myself, no, this is just a war. And this is a conflict that's based on really horrible things that these two populations have done to each other, that Israel has done to the Palestinians, and that Palestinians have done to Israel. This is just part of the conflict. And something like, all of a sudden I realized, no, this is laced with anti-Zionism. This is laced with anti-Semitism. Like, wake up, Leora. I call myself Leora, not Rabbi Landi, when I yell at myself. Wake up. And the past 2 years have been really, really shocking. There's been moments that I've been scared as a Jew, which I just could never have comprehended would be a part of my life.
Yeah. I think it's helpful to hear. I think one area where we also have some disagreement over this potentially is sort of the prospects for Israel's future. I know that you've spoken at length about your deep worry about Israel, and given the fractures in society. And I speak about, when I think about Israel now, yes, Israel is hated by much of the world, but Israel is economically and entrepreneurially thriving. Israel just effectively defeated multiple serious enemies at different areas of its doorstep and demonstrated its resolve. And I think for an entire generation of Israelis who are worried that kids these days would not live up to the levels of heroism of their grandparents or great-grandparents, I think this youngest generation in Israel has truly just shown honor upon themselves. And I think that Israel, if indeed, and this is sort of the God-willing glass way full hope, that out of this agreement comes an extension of Abraham Accords, comes a ability to secure a place amongst its neighbors to live side by side peacefully, that there's so much that Israel has going for it. And I'm praying, hoping that the leaders in Israel will take advantage of the opportunity of this moment to make decisions that will keep Israel strong, but at the same time will allow Israel to be accepted, God willing, as a, as a Middle Eastern country with its neighbors living side by side in peace. I hope that's, maybe we'll look at this as the worst of the worst before things got better.
I pray. I mean, that is such a theme in Judaism, like from destruction comes rebirth and rebuilding and renewal. And I pray that this is one of those redemptive moments where we've seen the worst and we've done the worst and we've experienced the worst and we just see better days. I really, really hope that this is an opportunity also to just remember humanity, that like we cannot forget that even our enemy have children, and our enemies have children and they're people, and the way that we just have to remember that we live in a very, very, very fragile moment and we just have to choose the right path at all times. Even when we are treated terribly, we have to do the right thing. And I just feel that very deeply. And I just want to share one sweet anecdote that I've been watching videos all day and watching the news, and I can't really get my head out of my phone today, just wanting to feel like I'm in Israel. And, I've been staring at the phone and seeing just so many things that made me smile and giggle and like tear up. And then obviously the thing that made me like burst into tears is watching this soldier leaving Gaza because the soldiers are starting to pull out, and it rains for the first time during Sukkot, which is considered to be a blessing. And the first rain is called the Yoreh, and it's celebrated. And just languages have, a lot of words for things that are very important. And Hebrew has a lot of words for the different kinds of rain. And so this was the Yoreh. This was the first rain, which means that it's going to be a year of blessing. And he's filming the Yoreh and figuring out which of the 30 dogs that have joined his unit, how they're coming back home with him. And I just started bawling because it was just like the desolation of Gaza, destroyed buildings. There's rain, there's life, there's connection between the soldiers who are coming home, between animals, between just like, it was just such a moment of pure beauty, humanity, hope. Dogs always make me cry, so that's a whole nother story. But like, I just hope that this week brings the prophetic version of better days.
Amen. Thank you all for joining us. And let's pray for hostages returning home safely and cessation of violence and perhaps more peaceful, better days ahead for Israel and its neighbors.
Amen. Am Yisrael Chai.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for joining us on In Such a Time. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. To learn more about Rabbis Jonathan Jaffe and Leora Landi, or to connect with Temple Beth-El of Northern Westchester, visit bethelnw.org, or follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Temple Beth-El NW. Thanks for listening.